So I want to talk to you today about how none of us knows what is around the corner, how everything we think we have planned for our future and everybody we thought would be in our future can be taken away from us in a split second. As this is exactly what happened to me on the afternoon of the 5th of May 2013. I was down in Cornwall with my gorgeous family, my husband Nico, my 4 children, Amber, Olivia, Emily and Kit. And we were doing what we always did. We were out hanging out at our favourite beach, Damer Bay, that morning. The day foretold nothing of the horror that was going to come that afternoon. We were rock pooling, sand dune jumping, swimming in the sea. The weather was stunning, the kind of day that makes you think, why does anybody ever go abroad? Rarely happens, I think, in Cornwall. And that afternoon we decided to take our rib, our speedboat, out. We went over to Padstow, got some fish and chips, ate them on the quay. I remember Nico was just so proud of his family. He had kids relatively late in life, and I think he always said that we were his greatest achievement. He leant over and kissed me and said, if an 18-year-old me saw me now, he'd think I'd done pretty well. And it gives me great comfort now to think, you know, he thought he'd made it in life. He was so happy, kind of work life, home life, where the rest of us are always striving to get somewhere. He really had reached his perfect place. So the day went on and we took the speedboat up and down the beautiful Camel Estuary. The sun was shining in our faces, the kids were laughing, screaming with joy, and we were just having fun together as a family like we'd always done before. The tide was going out, so Nico and I decided we were going to take the boat back to the mooring in Rock, and that's when it all started to go wrong. One of the kids shouted, let's go round again, let's go round again. So excited. Unfortunately, I can never ask Nico what happened next. It was a combination of too sharp a turn on a wheel, a slip on the throttle, pushing it to the max, that caused the boat to skid across the water and go into sort of wheelie. As it righted itself, it banged down onto the water, causing a similar sort of G-force to a jumbo jet taking off, apparently. The 6 of us didn't stand a chance. We were all catapulted out into the freezing cold water. It's taken me a long time to try and accept that an accident is a perfect storm of events that come together, which probably would never happen in the same sequence ever again, but did that day. And everybody that's been involved in an accident thinks that they should have been able to prevent it. And I've had to work very hard to stop the continuous loop in my head of the video of the boat going round and trying to stop what happened that day. My brain desperately trying to make sense of the senseless. And the worst part of the video is always when I surface in the water and the cold realization that the kill cord hadn't been attached as the boat is speeding away from us and going into the first of many sharp, full speed turns as it comes back in the water again and again, hitting each of us as it went. I didn't know where anybody else was. It was so noisy, the boat was going round, it all happened so quickly. All I could hear was my son, who was 4 at the time, shouting, no more cold water, mummy, no more cold water. So I swam over to him and thought we could swim to the nearby beach, realising, of course, how difficult it is to swim in a life jacket. I like to think that I swam us out of the circle of the boat and saved our lives. I turned to see where it was as I could hear the engine roaring up behind me. And as I turned around, I felt the hull of the boat hit my chest. And what I didn't really feel as much was the propeller cut my leg. I found out later that the incredibly brave Charlie Toogood jumped from the RNLI boat onto our speedboat to stop the boat from going round anymore. And then it was all sort of just eerily quiet. I was losing quite a lot of blood, dipping in and out of consciousness. But what amazes me at that moment, full of horror and tragedy, was the strength of the human survival instinct. And it was pumping my body full of adrenaline, trying to reassure me that everything was going to be okay. I knew that Nico hadn't made it. I'd heard Amber cry out across the water, "Mummy, Daddy's dead, Daddy's dead," as she tried to pull his body to the nearby rescue boat. So I thought, fine, okay, we're going to need to get some money, so we're going to have to sell the house. My leg's not looking great. I'd sort of seen it by then. That's fine. I'll get that amputated, I'll just strap on a prosthetic leg. It was bizarre what my brain was doing, trying to reassure me in that moment that we were going to survive and it was going to be okay. We were rescued by the RNLI and taken by RAF helicopter to Derriford Hospital in Plymouth. And as I said, I knew about Nico, but I didn't know about little Emily at the time. My brain actually just wouldn't let me go there. I think I just tried to think, well, maybe she's in an ambulance, not a helicopter. Maybe it's just the people that are injured in the helicopter, and she'll probably just meet us there. We'll meet her there later. It was only when we got there later that afternoon where a kind and weeping policeman came up to me to tell me that both Nico and Emily had suffered fatal injuries. And no one can imagine a parent being told that about their daughter. Soon after that, I was taken in surgery myself. I remember begging this poor, relatively young surgeon that he had to save my leg because I was now a single parent and a widow and I just couldn't look after my kids on my own with one leg. Huge amount of pressure, and apparently there was nothing that could be done. My arteries and nerves had been severed, so the only way forward was amputation. Fortunately, the first sensation I felt when I woke up on the morning of the 6th of May to a room full of weeping family and friends was one of numbness. Is the only way I can describe it. Again, my body was being pumped full of adrenaline, trying to not letting me feel the huge extent of the loss at that time, because it obviously just would have been too much for me. We never think it's going to be us, do we? I think we almost become slightly immune to the headlines in the newspapers. Earthquake in Italy, war in Syria, murder, abduction, mutilation. I was amazed how it actually was my family. How was that beautiful black and white picture of the 6 of us smiling that was hanging in my hall suddenly in every newspaper? I also didn't know who I was anymore. I kind of had to redefine myself. 24 hours before, I'd been a happily married mother of 4, and now suddenly I'd gained all these new titles that I hadn't even asked for. I was now a widow, a bereaved parent, a single parent, an amputee. None of them really made sense to me. I couldn't even really relate to what they meant. I just didn't really understand them. And coupled with this was a complete feeling of immobility. You know, we kind of take walking for granted, don't we? It's a bit like breathing. You just kind of are born and you do it. You know, to someone that's used to being in control and just being able to get up and go and get a cup of water or make a cup of tea, suddenly you have to rely on other people to do everything for you. And I mean everything. I had to call a porter if I wanted to go and visit my kids who are on a different floor, or go to the bathroom, or wash my hair, or anything. I couldn't even hop. What was left of my leg was kind of covered in a gauze with a drain coming out of it. So that was slightly frightening, and I'm sure the control freaks in the room can slightly relate to having to rely on everybody else. But actually, amazing bonds are created with having to ask for help and working together with lots of other people. And I'm so grateful to everyone that's helped me over the last 3 years, and we have amazing bonds now. I remember looking at the clock on the hospital wall and just thinking, how is the second still going? Do they not know that Nico and Emily are dead? Surely time is going to stop. It has to stop, right? But time becomes irrelevant when you've been in a trauma situation. Seconds become minutes, minutes become hours. It doesn't really matter anymore. I'd never had any time before to do anything, rushing around in a busy mum of 4 life, probably achieving very little. And now I suddenly had all the time in the world. You know, we all have plans, don't we? Short-term plans, what we're going to do that day, tomorrow, next week. Maybe longer-term plans, a holiday, a wedding next year. Suddenly I had not one single entry in my diary. I felt like I had no future. It was really, really frightening. But time has also taken on a really precious new meaning for me, because I have lots of it and Nico and Emily don't have any more. So I owe it to them to make the most of my time, because it really is a gift, and it's probably oversaid, but every day that we have is a gift and we have to make the most of it. All of us feel that we owe it to Nico and Emily to live our lives for them. My daughter Amber takes a little picture of Emily around in her wallet whenever she goes abroad, because she said she died when she was 8 and she was too young to see the world, so she's going to see it through my eyes. And Olivia writes little letters to Nico and Emily telling them what she's been up to and all the exciting things she's been doing. Because we're all lucky to be here. It could have been any of us that day. And I hate to admit it now, but I didn't feel that at the beginning. I was actually jealous of Nico for dying, jealous that he didn't have to feel any of this horrendous pain that I was feeling, just gone. I was terrified of my grief at the beginning. I just didn't think I was strong enough to cope with that level of loss and trauma. I ordered book after book from Amazon from my hospital bed, just desperate for some sort of manual for grief. Like, what do I do? Is there like a little door that I can go through and nip through to the other side and not have to do any of this pain because I don't like it? Of course, there isn't any manual. You just have to do it your own way. And a lot of the stories that I read, I couldn't really relate to, but there was one particular one that struck a chord, and it was about this girl who had lost her brother when she was 10, and he'd jumped off a bridge into too shallow water and broken his neck. And she said, not only did I lose my brother that day, but I lost my mother as well because she couldn't cope, and she took herself out of life and retreated to her bed, and that made me determined that that was not going to happen to my children. But how was I going to do it? I was terrified. I just gave myself very small, achievable goals, step by step by small step. By the way, why are there so many metaphors about feet, which I'd only realised? Now I only have one. And the doctors would say to me in the hospital, you just come over here and put your foot up, and you need to just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Well, not you, it's more of a hop, actually, for you. So my first goal was making sure that Kit's leg was saved, because his was kind of hanging off as well, but he had one more nerve attached than me, and none of us knew if it was going to be saved or not. Even the surgeons had never seen such a severe trauma injury on a 4-year-old boy. So they pinned the shattered bones together, and when that wasn't working, they repinned. They took skin grafts from his thigh to patch up where the propeller had cut him. And he taught me a huge amount about patience, which I've never been very good at, resilience, and living in the now. Because the now was all we had. We had no idea what the future held. We didn't know if he was going to save his leg or not. All we had was the now. And actually looking back, there was still some happy, joyous moments, unbelievably. You know, a month after the accident was his 5th birthday in hospital, and a friend brought him in his favourite little minion cake. All his little friends came in from reception. And there was laughter, there was happiness, there was obviously tears, but my 42nd birthday, a friend brought a bottle of champagne round, and we were sitting in the garden with me in a wheelchair, and I said, why have you brought that? And she said, because you are here. And we laughed, and it felt odd laughing, and I felt guilty laughing, but it felt so good that I couldn't help it. And I knew that laughter really is the best medicine, and we should never feel guilty about having a good time. When you've been through something traumatic and something horrendous, never feel guilty about having a good time. So eventually Kit's leg was saved. He walked the school sports day, holding hands with his friends, with his massive metal frame on, and won. Not a dry eye in that field, I can tell you. And he jumped off the bed and said, come on, Mum, let's go. And I didn't melt into a grief puddle on the floor like I thought I was going to, because then I had a next focus. I thought, well, I'll just get to the girls' sports day because I better go to that, and then I can just kind of collapse. And then I better just get through the summer holidays because they need me to be with them there, and then I'm sure I can just kind of collapse. But I didn't. I managed to just keep going, and I thought, well, I better learn to walk, because I was going to need to do that if I want to be the mum that I want to be to them. Not as easy as it turns out, actually, strapping on a prosthetic leg like I thought it was going to be. Even a short distance left me with rubs and cuts and affected my scar. And again, it was kind of, you know, here to the front door and back, and then take it off and wait for a little bit, and then here to the end of the garden and back. And it took ages. Many a time I just took it off and threw it across the room and thought, I just can't do this. This is too difficult for one person to cope with. But anyway, I did learn to walk, and now not only do I walk, but I run, I ski, I bike. I've just taken part in my first triathlon, and it makes me feel very empowered. And I think I fight against the word disabled, because that means not able, and I am able. I guess my driving factor has been to show the children that I'm totally capable of looking after them. I don't want them to think that they've got some disabled person they have to look after. And I think it's working, because I overheard Kit talk to his big sister Olivia on the sofa whilst watching Usain Bolt win the 100 metres at the Rio Olympics, and he said, I bet Mum could beat him. Not sure, but maybe in a super-powered wheelchair I could beat him. But yeah, that's what kind of keeps me going. And I'd like to say to my surgeon, who told me, don't worry, below the knee amputees do get back to doing 90 to 95% of what they did before. Still trying to find that last 5%. So I also want to talk to you about grief, because grief is invisible. And you might look at me now and think, well, she looks fine, she's obviously better. You know, grief is not something that you get better from. You don't move on. It's not an illness where you can tell that someone's not very well. So if you have any friends going through grief or a challenging situation, you might not be able to see it on the outside, but they might be going through something horrendous on the inside. And I think we just need to be very aware and compassionate with whatever people are going through. I liken my grief to the waves of the sea, that sometimes I'm in the middle of a storm, there's thrashing, big, white, frothy waves pushing me under, tumbling, suffocating me, and I don't know which way is up. But then the storm always passes and the blue skies always come out again, and the gentle waves massage the bruises that have been worn by the perfect storm. And yes, the stormy periods are horrendous, but once I knew the path of grief, I wasn't so scared of it anymore. Once I knew that every stormy period would be followed by the calm waters, I knew that I could do it. I knew that I was brave enough and that I had the strength to do it. And every grief journey is different. There is no right or wrong way to grieve, but I promise you, if you allow yourself to feel the pain of grief or challenge or whatever you're going through, the calm waters will come again, and they'll bring joy with them and a new perspective and appreciation of life. You know, I look at the accident and I think, yes, gosh, it's taken so much away from me, but I've also taken from it. It's shaken me awake from a sort of apathy I was living in before and given me a new appreciation of every little thing that I do, whether it's taking the dogs for a walk on a beautiful day or having coffee with a girlfriend or reading Kit a bedtime story. You know, I can't read Emily any more bedtime stories, but I can read Kit a bedtime story, and God, I used to find them boring. I'd skip through a few pages and then he'd notice and like, oh yes, sorry, we're back to chapter 5. But now I can do it. He's there, and I want to make the most of every single second I have on this earth with my children. And you know, we're not leaving Nico and Emily behind. We're bringing them forward into what I call our new normal. They wouldn't want us to live in the past. They would want us to live in the now. Thank you very much.